How you doing, Iowa State? Congratulations. The Cyclones are the 2019 Big 12 tournament champions with a 78-66 win over Kansas. I'm Matthew Postins with Heartland College Sports. We are on the floor here at the Sprint Center here in Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas. My geography is always a little off. Kansas City, Missouri, that's what the box score says. But you got to give it up to Iowa State, who came into this tournament not playing particularly well. They really didn't have a lot of momentum coming into this tournament, and they ended up beating Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas, the 4, 1, and 3 seeds in this tournament. So they'll advance with the automatic berth in the NCAA tournament. The bracket will come out tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about that here in just a couple of minutes. But we still have fans on the floor. We still have players doing post-game interviews. We've got music pumping through the speaker system, and I've got confetti at my workstation. So we've got everything we need to talk about this for a few minutes. Iowa State played great tonight. Let's just be abundantly clear about how they won this game. They shot lights out pretty much the whole way through. They were only 41% from the floor in the first half, but they were 13-31. Not too bad. Kansas was much worse in the first half. 10-36, 27%. They were 0 of 9 from 3. They were 25% from the free throw line. They were down by 10 at halftime. But you figure it's Kansas. They're going to make halftime adjustments. They're going to play better. And that's what they did. They ended up shooting 51.4% from the field. And they even hit 3 threes. That will usually get you back in a game where you're down 10. Well, it doesn't get you back in that game when a team like Iowa State shoots 70% from the floor for most of the second half. It was pretty incredible. At one point, I think they were 11 of 14 from the floor. Nobody was missing for them in the final 20 minutes of this game. They ended up shooting 56.5% from the field for the second half, 48.1% for the game. Mario Shayok was your Big 12 tournament MVP. He had 15 points. Lindell Wiggins actually led with 17 points. He was on the all-tournament team. So was Michael Jacobson with 14 points and 5 rebounds. Of course, last night he had 16 rebounds against Kansas State. So he had a good tournament. Wigginton had a good tournament. Shayok had a good tournament. Taylor Horton-Tucker had 8 points. Tyrese Halliburton had 11 points. They ended up 7 of 19 from the three-point line, 19 of 25 from the free throw line. And I said at halftime on Twitter, Iowa State has to get a little bit better at the free throw line because at that point, going into the half, they were only 3 of 7. So they gathered a lot of momentum in that second half and shot at 16 of 18 from the free throw line. So really, when you shoot like that, you're going to be really hard to beat. And that's kind of what Iowa State was. If you think about the 3 games they've had in this tournament, they really only had one bad half shooting the basketball, and that came in the first half against Kansas State. Otherwise, they were a very consistent shooting team. Bill Self said himself coming into this game, this is the best offensive team in the Big 12, and I think I've been saying that as well for most of the season. It's a very good offensive team that Iowa State takes into the NCAA tournament. Kansas, they just weren't there tonight, and that's exemplified by Dedrick Lawson, who has been their most consistent player in Big 12 play. 8 of 21 from the floor, missed his only 3-point attempt, 2 of 3 from the free throw line, ended up scoring 18 points. That's usually a very good game for him, but especially in the first half, there just seemed to be a lid on the basket as far as he was concerned. And if Dedrick Lawson isn't going well for you, if you're Kansas, you got to find one of your freshmen to step up. And the one freshman that stepped up tonight, at least from a scoring standpoint, was Devin Dotson, who had 17 points, had 3 assists, had 3 rebounds. He was one of only 3 Jayhawks that made a three-pointer in this game. Jayhawks have not been a particularly consistent three-point shooting team this year. But remember last night against West Virginia, Quentin Grimes came out and had 5 three-pointers in that game. Kansas was 3 of 18 from the three-point line tonight. That was part of the reason why they could not keep up with Iowa State in this one. You also look at the box score. Marcus Garrett had a huge night on the glass, 15 rebounds, but just 7 points. And then Quentin Grimes had 10 points. But again, Grimes 0 for 6 from the three-point line. It's almost as if he used everything up last night that he had from the arc, and he just couldn't put anything in the basket from downtown tonight. it was just one of those games for Kansas. It was almost as if, to a certain degree, the gas just wasn't in the tank anymore for them. And they made runs in the second half. You could see it. They got it down to 10 at one point. Iowa State pushed it back to 14. They got it down to 9 at one point. Iowa State pushed it back out to 13, 14 points. So it's every time Kansas put together a little mini run to kind of get back into the game, Iowa State did what you have to do against a team like Kansas. You have to match that run. I can think of a particular run late in the second half. Kansas had it down to 10 points. I think Halliburton followed it up with a 3, and then Wigginton followed it up with 2 free throws, and suddenly Iowa State was back to being up 14, 15 points. So, every time Kansas tried to match Iowa State found a way to kind of hold them off and put them at bay. And the way they played this game, they played the kind of style they wanted. They were up-tempo. They got up and down the floor. They played really good defense. Actually wrote in my preview story, it might be the team that has the fewest turnovers that wins this game. Well, guess what? Both teams had 11 turnovers, so that was a push. But what really won this game for Iowa State was their ability to shoot the ball consistently throughout the game, their red-hot second half, and the fact that they were able to match Kansas throughout the second half every time Kansas tried to make a run. So as they're trying to break things down here on Press Row, let's talk about tomorrow because it's Selection Sunday. Let's spend a couple of minutes talking about that. After Iowa State beat Kansas State on Friday, they moved up a seed in both ESPN's and CBSSports.com's bracketology. They moved up from a 7 to a 6. So do they move up a little bit further tomorrow when the real bracket comes out on Sunday? That's interesting because now you have Iowa State having beaten the number 1 seed in this tournament, the number 3 seed and ranked team in Kansas, and another quality tournament team in Baylor. That's going to help their strength of schedule. It's going to help all the other metrics that the committee is going to look at going into the selection. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they stayed where they were at number 6, but I'm kind of thinking, depending upon what happens in the rest of the country, they might end up being in that 5 line, and that might be advantageous to them. Kansas came into this game as a pretty consistent 4 in both brackets. I don't think this loss hurts them that much because, frankly, Iowa State has been a team that's been ranked off and on throughout the year. They've got a good strength of schedule. They've got a good BPI, all those other metrics. So the loss really doesn't hurt Kansas that much. I think they'll probably be on that 4 line when the bracket comes out Sunday. The team that I think potentially this hurts the most maybe is Kansas State. I can see them staying at 4. I can see them dropping down a spot to 5. I think Texas Tech's going to stay at that 4 position that they've been at in both brackets since they lost that semifinal game, or that quarterfinal game, rather. When we look at the bracket tomorrow, I think you're going to see 7 Big 12 teams in there. I think the ones that made it to the semifinals in this tournament are safe. I think Texas Tech is obviously safe. The 3 teams you got to watch, Oklahoma, they've been a pretty consistent 10 the last couple of weeks, even though they don't have the best conference record in the world. I think they get in. TCU is on the bubble in both CBS and ESPN. They've got TCU as a last 4 in. It's going to kind of depend on what happens in the other tournaments tonight and tomorrow as to whether TCU gets in. They've been pretty consistently in both brackets throughout January, February, and March. I think they get in. I think the one team that's the odd team looking out is Texas. I know a lot of people have made a big deal out of their strength of schedule and their quality wins. Of course, they've got the big win over North Carolina. But the fact is they're a 500 team. No 500 team has ever gotten an at-large bid. Only one team in the last 25 years has reached the NCAA tournament as an at-large when there are 4 games or fewer above 500. That was Georgia back in 2001. They're already out of Jerry Palm's bracket completely. They're not even a first 4 out. Lenardi has them as a first 4 out. A lot's going to depend about what happens around the country. We all know the Pac-12 is a bad conference this year. They usually get 4 or 5 bids. They're probably only going to get 2. That could play a factor. We need to see if somebody gets upset that we're not expecting to get into the tournament in the next 24 hours. Some of those factors might save Texas in terms of getting to the NCAA tournament. But let's be clear, and I've said this on Twitter the last couple of days, I think an NIT run makes a lot more sense for Texas in terms of developing their young talent for next season than to go to the NCAA tournament and lose a game. Let's be honest. That doesn't help their team that much in terms of development for next season because Shaka Smart has a lot of talent on that team. He's got a great recruiting class coming in. He's got a couple more scholarships that he can use too. He could have a really interesting basketball team that could, win 20, 22 games next year. But if you just go to the NCAA tournament and you lose a game, what good does that do you? In the NIT, they could be a 1 or a 2 seed. They could go 3-4 rounds deep. They could get to Madison Square Garden like TCU did a couple of years ago. And TCU used that as a springboard to get to the NCAA tournament next year. I could see the same thing happening for Texas if they get selected to the NIT. I could see them having a long NIT run, getting a lot out of that, and getting guys like Courtney Ramey, Jace Febris, and their other young players developed just that much further down the line as you go into next year. So we're going to wrap it up. It's been about 10 minutes. Again, Iowa State wins the 2019 Big 12 conference tournament. We'll be back here next year, March 12th through March 15th here in Kansas City. And in fact, the women's tournament is going to be here over at the Coliseum from the men's tournament's the 11th through the 14th, the women's tournament's the 12th through the 15th. So they're going to be going on concurrently. So it's going to be a lot of fun next year in Kansas City if you're a basketball fan, not just if you're a men's fan, but if you're a women's fan too. I should add Dedrick Lawson and Devin Dotson both on the all-tournament team from Kansas. The other 3 spots, Lindell Wigington, Michael Jacobson, and of course Mariel Shayok was the Big 12 tournament MVP. So we'll find out where everybody sits for March tomorrow. We know Iowa State is certain to be in. They have an automatic berth. We know Kansas is going. It's just a matter of where they're seated. I don't think they're going to be anywhere close to Kansas City, to be honest with you. I would think they were hoping that was going to be their goal, to be around Kansas City for the regional. I don't think they're going to get that kind of help being a 4 or even a 5 seed. So we'll all see tomorrow. I'm flying back to Dallas tomorrow afternoon when I touch down. We'll have brackets by then. And Pete Mundo and I will do a podcast talking about the Big 12, how they look in the NCAA tournament, where they're seated, where they're going, and which teams we think are going to go the farthest. And depending upon the seeding, I could see Iowa State making a pretty significant tournament run because they're one of the best offensive teams going into this tournament. And now they got all kinds of momentum going into next week and going into the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. So I'm Matthew Postins. I'm with Heartland College Sports. Pete Mundo's with Iowa State right now getting some more quotes. Check my Twitter feed at Postins Postcard. Lots of video from postgame. Pete's got a lot on our Heartland_CS Twitter feed as well. This video will be replayed on YouTube and here on the Facebook page. And until the next time we talk, congratulations again to Cyclone Nation. This place is cleared out. They're over in the Power and Light District. I'm sure they're having a lot of fun. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to Kansas on a great season. We'll see you later.